The county courthouse was buzzing as it always did on Monday mornings. Clerks shuffling papers, attorneys adjusting ties, and officers moving defendants from one hearing to the next. For most people, it was just another day of routine. But for Officer Bradley Kane, it was another opportunity to flaunt his authority. Kane was known across town not just for being strict, but for the sharp edge of cruelty that clung to his actions. He smiled too easily when others squirmed, and his reputation among minority communities was especially bitter. People whispered that he enjoyed the fear he inspired. No one in the department confronted him directly. After all, Kane knew how to work the system. He dotted his reports, cited regulations, and leaned on the unspoken protection that often shielded officers like him. That morning, he escorted a young black woman named Vanessa Johnson into the courtroom. She had been cited for a minor traffic violation, nothing that should have warranted anything more than a fine. Yet Kane carried himself as if he were delivering a dangerous criminal. His grip on her elbow was tight, unnecessarily forceful, drawing stares as he pushed her toward the bench. Vanessa, dressed neatly and with her hair braided with care, held her chin high despite the humiliating march. She had spent the night rehearsing how she would respectfully explain her side to the judge. But Kane wasn't interested in her dignity. Before the judge even entered, Kane leaned toward her and said loud enough for others to hear, "You people think you can play the system. Not today." His words dripped with disdain, slicing through her composure. When the clerk instructed Vanessa to remove her hair accessories, an outdated rule about courtroom decorum, she began untying them quietly. But Kane intervened, grabbing a pair of scissors from a desk drawer. In one swift, shocking motion, he hacked off several of her braids. Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her hair, something tied to her identity, her culture, her very sense of self, was tossed into a trash bin as if it were nothing. A hot wave of humiliation washed over her, but she forced herself not to cry. She would not give him the satisfaction. "Now you look respectable," Kane sneered, stepping back with smug satisfaction. The cruelty of the act hung in the air, but no one spoke. The other officers averted their eyes. The clerk buried herself in her papers. Silence became complicity. When the judge finally entered, Vanessa stood with her head bowed, the uneven ends of her braids visible to everyone. She answered questions softly, finished her hearing, and left the courthouse without protest. On the surface, she complied, but inside, something powerful began to burn. That day wasn't just another abuse of authority. For Vanessa, it was a turning point. Kane thought he had humiliated her, reduced her to nothing. What he had actually done was plant the seed of a resolve that would one day return to face him in a way he could never have imagined. Vanessa walked out of the courthouse that morning with her shoulders stiff and her hands trembling. The sharp winter air bit against her skin, but it was nothing compared to the raw sting of humiliation burning inside her. People on the courthouse steps whispered, some staring openly at her uneven braids. She pulled her coat tighter and kept walking, each step heavy with the weight of what had just been stolen from her. Not only her dignity, but a part of her very identity. At home, her mother gasped when she saw the damage. "Baby, what happened?" she cried, reaching for the jagged tufts where Kane's scissors had left their cruel mark. Vanessa wanted to collapse into her mother's arms, to sob until the hurt melted away. Instead, she steadied her voice. "It's fine, Mama. It's just hair." But both of them knew it was more than that. In the days that followed, Vanessa faced an internal storm. Every time she looked in the mirror, the uneven braids reminded her of Kane's smirk, his voice dripping with contempt. Shame clawed at her chest, and for a while she avoided going out, not wanting neighbors or friends to see her like that. But slowly, something inside her shifted. She realized she couldn't let that moment define her. If she let humiliation keep her down, then Kane would win twice, once in the courthouse and again in her silence. Vanessa began to reclaim her sense of self in small, deliberate steps. She went to a local salon, where a stylist carefully trimmed her braids into a fresh, even cut. "You're beautiful," the woman told her softly. For the first time since the incident, Vanessa felt a flicker of hope. At night, she poured her emotions into a worn leather journal, page after page filled with her thoughts. The pain of being targeted, the anger at the system that let men like Cain thrive, and the quiet but growing determination to do something about it. She read books on civil rights, biographies of women who had risen above oppression, and essays on justice. Each story fueled her own fire. Her community, too, noticed her resilience. Neighbors who had heard whispers about what happened began reaching out. A retired teacher reminded her of her sharp mind and encouraged her to pursue higher education. A pastor told her, "Don't let this be your ending. Let it be your beginning." Vanessa listened. Slowly, the narrative in her head shifted. Instead of replaying Cain's cruelty, she started to imagine herself in positions of influence. Somewhere she could make decisions, somewhere her voice would matter. She began attending community meetings, volunteering at a legal aid office, and enrolling in college courses. Every success, no matter how small, became an act of defiance against that single degrading moment in court. Cain had tried to strip her of her pride. Instead, he had unknowingly forged her resolve. What Vanessa didn't realize then was that her journey had only just begun. The courtroom humiliation was not her downfall. It was the spark that would lead her to heights far beyond Cain's reach. Years passed, but the memory of that courtroom never left Vanessa. Instead of breaking her, it became the compass guiding her life. She worked 2 jobs while studying, balancing exhaustion with determination. Every paycheck went toward tuition, books, and late-night coffees that fueled her endless essays. Each exam she passed, each paper she submitted, felt like one more brick laid on the path away from humiliation and toward empowerment. Her professors quickly noticed her sharp intellect and unshakable work ethic. She wasn't just another student. She asked difficult questions, challenged outdated norms, and spoke up for those who stayed quiet. When she majored in political science, it was no surprise to anyone. Vanessa wasn't just studying for herself. She was preparing for a purpose. During college, she joined student organizations dedicated to social justice and civil rights. She volunteered with legal aid clinics, helping tenants fight unfair evictions and families navigate the complexities of the justice system. The people she met, single mothers, underpaid workers, immigrants struggling with language barriers, reminded her daily why she was on this path. Their struggles echoed her own, and she carried their stories with her like fuel. By the time Vanessa entered law school, she had become a force of nature. Professors admired her eloquence, and classmates often turned to her for guidance. Still, she carried herself with humility, never forgetting the young woman who once walked out of a courthouse with uneven braids and burning shame. Every long night of studying, every mock trial she practiced, felt like a direct rebuke to Cain's cruelty. She wasn't just learning the law, she was arming herself with the tools to dismantle injustice. When she finally graduated, her family filled the auditorium with cheers. Her mother cried openly, clutching a program as though it were gold. Vanessa, dressed in her cap and gown, stood tall, knowing she hadn't just earned a degree. She had rewritten her own story. Her career took off in public defense. Vanessa quickly earned a reputation as a relentless advocate, especially for marginalized clients who couldn't afford strong representation. She refused to let cases become statistics, poring over every detail, ensuring each voice was heard. Judges began to take notice, as did community leaders. She became known not only for her brilliance in the courtroom but for her unwavering empathy. Over time, Vanessa's influence grew. She lectured at law schools, mentored young attorneys, and served on committees dedicated to criminal justice reform. Everywhere she went, she carried the lesson of her own humiliation. Power misused could destroy lives, but power wielded responsibly could transform them. What began as one woman's quiet fight to regain her dignity had become something much bigger. Vanessa was no longer just surviving. She was shaping the very system that had once tried to break her. But destiny wasn't finished with her yet. The true moment of reckoning was still to come, the day when her path would cross once more with Officer Bradley Cain. And this time, the balance of power would be reversed. Years later, The courthouse looked the same. Same marble floors, same creaking wooden benches, same hum of voices bouncing off high ceilings. But for Vanessa, everything was different. She no longer walked in as a young woman trembling under the weight of humiliation. She now entered with the authority of a black robe and the respect that came with it. Judge Vanessa Johnson. The title alone carried a sense of triumph that still amazed her family and community. Her journey from victim to judge had been long and grueling, but it was not luck. It was earned through relentless discipline, sleepless nights, and an unshakable belief that change was possible. When she first sat on the bench, she promised herself she would never forget how it felt to be powerless. Every ruling she gave, every decision she made, was rooted in fairness and compassion. Then came the day fate circled back. On the docket that morning was a case involving police misconduct. Vanessa skimmed the file as the bailiff announced the names. When she heard Officer Bradley Kane, her breath caught for a fraction of a second. She looked up and there he was. The same man, older now but with the same arrogant posture, though this time he was the one standing nervously before the bench. Kane had been charged with excessive force and abuse of authority. Years of misconduct had finally caught up with him. Reports detailed a pattern of intimidation and racial profiling, each instance eerily similar to what Vanessa herself had endured. But unlike that day long ago, Kane no longer had the power of silence protecting him. His actions were documented, witnesses had spoken, and the system he once manipulated now had its eyes wide open. The courtroom fell silent as Vanessa adjusted her glasses and looked directly at him. Kane froze. Recognition spread across his face, followed quickly by disbelief. The woman he had mocked, humiliated, and tried to break now sat in judgment over him. The smug confidence he once carried evaporated, replaced by unease. Vanessa didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her very presence was justice enough. In her calm, steady voice, she proceeded with the case as professionally as she did with any other. But every word she spoke carried a deeper weight, a reminder that the scales of justice, once tilted against her, now rested firmly in her hands. When the verdict was finally read, Kane was found guilty. The sentence wasn't harsh by some standards: suspension, loss of pension, and mandatory community service. But for a man who had built his identity on unchecked authority, it was devastating. He left the courtroom a broken figure, stripped of the power he had abused for so long. As for Vanessa, she didn't smile or celebrate. She simply nodded, tapped her gavel, and adjourned. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, accountability, and healing. Walking back to her chambers, she paused for a moment, remembering the girl who once left this very building humiliated and broken. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had taken pain and turned it into purpose. And for the first time, Vanessa allowed herself a quiet smile.